depending on where you're joining us from. So if you got the ping, don't know what this is, that's okay, because I'm going to let you know. We are the Closing Show Live. What is the Closing Show Live? It's a weekly live show featuring the people of Proposify, sales stars in the trenches, and revenue leaders. The Closing Show Live is hosted by me, Nadia Milani, VP of Marketing at Proposify. And every week we discuss the challenges we're facing and the no BS lessons that we've learned through experimenting so you can crush your close rates. So welcome, everyone. You know what? If you are joining us, just let us know where you're joining us from. Just put it in the comments if you want to say hello. We have some people from Canada, Toronto, Halifax. We have the US. Where are you joining us from today? So just some really quick housekeeping, by the way. Sometimes the live freezes. So it's not us, it's linked the LinkedIn stream. So if that happens, just press pause, press play, and then we'll be back on. And yeah, just drop where you're joining us from the comments. So what are we talking about today? I'm actually really excited as a marketer. I was very much geeking out on this episode because today we're talking to Katelyn, the customer whisperer. And I've been following Katelyn for a very, very long time, like years. I don't know, Katelyn, if Katelyn knows this, but I've been following, not stalking her, but kind of maybe on social a bit. And and I was so pleased that she was agreed to join us today. So what we're going to be talking about is just customers and how do you speak to them? How do you do it? What's the best way of talking to customers and why it's super, super important? How do you really get close to your customers so it's not awkward in any way? And today, Katelyn's really generous. She's giving away a free copy of her Clarity call sheet. So all you got to do to win is just ask a question in the comments. So if you have a question for me or for Katelyn, ask a question, you'll win one of Katelyn's Clarity call sheets, which is great. So welcome to the show, Katelyn. Enough from me.
Hi. Hey, everyone. I love seeing people coming in from all over the world. I see some fellow Nova Scotians in the house. So whoop, whoop.
Nice. Woo. And we have Detroit, we've got San Jose, we've got some Toronto peeps, Boston, US, Germany, Switzerland. Hello, Geneva, Switzerland. We've got Cindy, Kevin, lots of people from all over the world. This is so awesome. So Katelyn, I want to start. I'm going to get right to it because you know why? The half hour always goes by really, really fast every single week. And then I get to 29 minutes and I'm like, I haven't asked all the questions that I wanted to. And I just have so many for you. So I want to just start with who you are, what you do. And I want to ask you, because sometimes I intro and I mess it up. So tell me a little bit more about you, Customer Camp, and why have you focused on the customer? And why do people call you the customer whisperer?
All right. So I'll give you the Coles Notes version. So I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years. My first business was I went out and started freelancing, and then I grew that into a branding agency. And actually, that's how I met Kyle, who's the co-founder of Proposify. Him and I had our agencies next door to each other. And I kind of ping-ponged off of that, built a restaurant consulting business that got acquired. And then I decided, hey, we're doing all of this great work, but I want to start marketing our own product. Maybe we should build something. Maybe we should build software. How hard could that be? Turns out very, very hard. Much harder than I anticipated. But I launched a tech company around the same time that Proposify had launched. Kyle's old agency actually did the UI designs for us. And really, things were looking really good from the outside. We were being called the next LinkedIn for women. It was a business network platform with some kind of unique things baked in, and it did not work. We built the wrong thing. And I thought that we had validated that people wanted what we were building, right? I went out and I did a ton of what are called customer discovery interviews for anybody from the startup space. And I botched all of them, and I didn't realize it. I talked to 300 people and screwed them all up. And so when that company, made a slow death, which is very, very painful, I was licking my wounds and I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? What am I going to be when I grow up? I thought I was going to be this big, startup owner. I thought I was building the next LinkedIn. And I was fortunate because while we sucked at building the right product, we were really good at marketing. And so my VC came to me, and I'll actually want to Proposify's VCs as well, and said, hey, you are great at marketing. We've got all these companies in our portfolio that really aren't strong at that, but they're building amazing products and nobody knows about them. Will you work with some of them? And I said, hell yes, because I need some money.
Please. Yes, please.
Yeah, please pay me to do something. And so I started consulting again, which is, throwback to my previous life. And I sat down at the boardroom with all of these amazing founders who are building world-changing technology in many cases. And I'd ask them the question that we need to know as marketers. And I'd say, tell me about your customers. And I was just shocked how often I couldn't get a straight answer. People would say things like, oh, like we serve this audience, but also these 6 personas. Or they'd say, our customer base are companies that sell on the internet with anywhere between 10 and 500 employees. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I can't market to that. That's everybody. We need to get better at this. And so I realized that I needed to help these companies to get clear on who their customers were. And so I started digging in and trying to learn as much as I could about customer discovery and customer development, because I thought we'd done it right the first time in my startup, and I obviously hadn't. And as I learned more and more, I became obsessed with the topic, and I discovered jobs to be done, which is a theory for understanding why people buy things. I met Bob Mesta, who is one of the leading kind of thought leaders behind Jobs to be Done. He worked with Clayton Christensen to pioneer this way of working. And I just became a complete nerd for understanding demand. And essentially that led me to launch Customer Camp. And Customer Camp started off with us doing some consulting, helping people to better understand their buyers. And it has morphed over the last 4 years. And now we're really focused on understanding customers from a research perspective, which is what our Clarity Call cheat sheets help people do, but also from the more human perspective around buyer psychology and behavioral economics. And so I've got a newsletter that we write, and we have sponsors for that. I've got a cohort-based challenge that I just wrapped up that I'm running with the team at Demand Curve. So the business has a few different tentacles, but it all comes down to one thing, which is we help businesses to better understand why their customers buy so they can get more of those people. And that's my obsession.
So, so if you want one of the Clarity Call sheets, this is stuff that you can purchase them, but if you want to win one bundle of Katelyn's Clarity Call sheets, just ask a question. So simple. And you'll know by the end of this CSL Closing Show Live if you've won. We'll let you know right away. So you mentioned something, though, as part of like the journey to Customer Camp. And first of all, it's fascinating for a couple of reasons. One is Kyle, yes, is our CEO and founder. And I didn't realize you guys went back that far, but he is a huge, huge fan and proponent of talking to customers. So he actually, everyone in the company has to talk to customers. It doesn't matter what department you're in. If you are in engineering, you're talking to customers. If you're in product, I mean, obviously you're talking to customers. If you're in sales, you do talk to customers. But marketers, so marketing, we do talk to customers. But it's funny you said like founders that you were speaking to didn't talk to customers. So why is that? Like, why are people not talking to customers, and how do they start?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons why. The biggest one is that a lot of them have bought into 2 lies that I think are very convenient lies to buy into. One is they see themselves as a Steve Jobs type character, and they say, Steve Jobs didn't do market research. Or they say, Henry Ford said, if I would have asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And both of these, for one, Steve Jobs didn't do market research, but he did customer research all the time. And he was actually one of the pioneers of applying what became Jobs to be Done inside of Apple. And Henry Ford never said that. There's no evidence that Henry Ford said that. But these are convenient lies that we tell ourselves, which are that our customers don't know what they want. That's our job. And therefore, why talk to them? And the reality is customers don't know what they want. And that's not why you're talking to them. You're talking to customers because you want to understand their pain points with their current solutions. You want to understand the friction that they're experiencing that would make them consider switching to something else. And if you're like us and you're a marketer, then you want to understand when they begin the journey to searching for a new solution, what are the trigger events that lead them to start considering something new? Because trigger events are this huge untapped gold mine for marketers. Because guess what? We spend all this time getting in front of people who might match a particular persona. But if those people haven't experienced an event that's pushed them from, I don't give an F about what you do, to, oh my goodness, this is a flaming hot like priority and how do I find a solution, then we miss the opportunity to get in front of people at the right time, right? And with the right message. So the goal of talking to customers, it's not to have them tell you what the product should be. It's not to have them like, weigh in on your landing page design and say, I don't like that color. Like, like I wish that it was more of this. It's to really understand their buying journey. Because when you understand their buying journey, you can understand what makes them begin that journey. Again, super powerful. Where and who do they trust when they're looking for information? What else are they considering before they even discover that you exist? So those are their like alternative solutions, many of which might not look anything like you, right?
Right.
One of the things that we say in the startup world all the time that I'm sure Kyle said is like, your biggest competitor, it's not this other software company that does the thing you do. It's usually a spreadsheet or an intern that's doing the thing manually or ignoring it until it becomes a burning fire, right? Like, and so we think of our competitors oftentimes as this very narrow set of like, they do the thing the way we do the thing, but customers don't think that way. And when you understand who customers see as your competitors, suddenly you have this huge opportunity to get in front of people way earlier when they're starting to explore what they see as your competitors before they even know that maybe your solution or category exists. So it's all about understanding that buying journey, because that allows you to understand from a marketing perspective how to get in front of the right people sooner with the right messages, which is way more economical than burning every dollar you have on Facebook ads and Google. And then from a product perspective, it's understanding what are the expectations that they have, what are the things they can't do today that they want to be able to do, and how does that allow us to inform how we can design a product that helps them get their whole job done, as opposed to designing a product based on kind of guesswork or what we think they should be doing and how they should work.
So good. Ian Beveridge, I hope I didn't say that wrong. He asks, what if you naturally serve several types of customers? So what if you have a whole bunch of different customers, different segments? Like, how do you pick which one to talk to? Do you just talk to them all?
Well, it all depends. So it depends where, like, I know that that's the worst feedback in marketing, but it depends. Ultimately, this is what I say. When you think about the goal that you have as a company, right? There's probably some type of goal that you have as a company that you want to achieve right now. So maybe it's, we want to like improve retention, or we want to get more customers, or we want to improve our onboarding. Attach the customer interviews that you do and the customer like research that you do to the most pressing like goals in the company. So if you serve multiple customer personas, then you can probably find out through looking at your data, through talking to your salespeople, even through anecdotal like insights inside of the company, who are the ones who are kind of the juiciest and best customers, your favored customers, right? I would start there. And once, if you're really looking for more of like a overarching view of the customer journey, I'd start there. But then bake in talking to customers based on your strategic priorities as a company. You should not just be randomly willy-nilly out there always talking to folks, because it's going to feel more laborsome. You're not going to know what to do with the insights that you gather. It's not going to relate to a project that's meaningful to the team. So base the interviews that you're doing or the surveys or other forms of research that you're doing based on the priorities of the company. And if you don't know who your customers are yet, you haven't figured out your best fit customers, then you might want to say, okay, we're going to talk to, 3 or 4 different types of personas, ones that we've been serving, and try to get an understanding as to who's getting the most value, where we're falling short, and where we might be able to really make a foothold so we can prioritize growing that segment if it's the one that's the most lucrative and our happiest customers. So I'd say most of the time, who you talk to and when, it's really going to depend on what priorities you have as a business.
Love it. So start with your stickiest customers, like figure out who those are and speak to them. And then Jen, I think you answered Jenna's question, how do you access potential customers before you've sold to anyone? That's about getting your persona, like who you think you need to be selling to before you actually get the sale.
And you can figure it out. So in the cheat sheets, I give this whole section on who to talk to when you don't have customers yet, or maybe you're thinking about entering a new market, so you kind of know who you'd like to talk to, but you don't have any of them as customers yet. That you can do some sneaky things. So you can spy on your competitors, right? Like let's say your competitors are active on Twitter. A lot of bigger companies and small companies will have be doing support through Twitter. So you can see disgruntled customers complaining about this just happened or that just happened. Those can be interesting people to reach out to and say, hey, I see that you're using X, Y, and Z, and we are working on something, or we've got this. I don't want to pitch you on it, but I'd really love to understand what made you choose that company, how you're using it. Can I incentivize you for a one-on-one interview? You have to be careful with the language you use, because most of the time people are not accustomed to being reached out to do an interview like this. Yeah. And so you want to make it very clear that this is not a sales pitch. And one of the ways that I do that is I offer them an incentive, and I say, we will offer you an incentive of, it could be a gift card to your favorite local restaurant, so it doesn't feel scammy, right? It could be a donation to your favorite charity. That one tends to get big decision makers whose time is very valuable to say yes, because they're like, all right, you're going to make a donation to a charity. Now I feel kind of like obligated. I should probably say yes. So what I would say is spy on your competitors. You can find people that way. Read reviews if you're a business where people are reviewing on Crunchbase or on G2 Crowd, not Crunchbase, but on G2 Crowd or any other type of review site. Go to try to find people who are writing reviews for your competitors, and those might be prospects to follow up with and reach out to. So you can definitely find folks to talk to before you have your own customers, as a way of doing really meaningful pre-research.
Katelyn's dropping some awesome tips. I'm actually taking some notes. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so you mentioned something at the very beginning. You said you were trying to do, you're trying to launch a startup, interviewed 300 customers or more, and you did it all wrong. So tell me a little bit about what were you doing wrong, and how do you do it right?
I love that you asked that question, because I see people making this mistake all the time. So people do customer development and customer discovery is something that is like this mantra in the startup world, but there's not a lot of people teaching you how to do it. People say you have to talk to customers. They don't necessarily tell you how. And the biggest mistake that people make is they get somebody on the phone or, on a Zoom call, and they spend the first 10 minutes describing their product, or they spend their time describing the problem that they're going to solve. And then they ask their customer for feedback on their product idea, or on, well, have you ever experienced this problem? And the challenge there is that we are all terrible at predicting things that we're going to do in the future. We're much better at being, storytellers of things that have happened in the past, things that actually happen. You're going to get much more accurate information when you talk to the people about things that they've actually done. So when I did those 300 interviews, I started by just talking to entrepreneurs that I knew, because at the time we had it narrowed down on focusing specifically on women entrepreneurs. And I talked to entrepreneurs that I knew, and I noticed a trend very quickly, which was that, it seemed that women were more open to my idea. And I was like, oh, well, that must mean that this is a great opportunity for women. And then I did some market research and learned that women were starting businesses at the fastest rate in history. I should target them. So I then focused on women, and I interviewed all women, and I pitched them my idea. And I waited for their response. And guess what happens when you pitch somebody your idea and you wait for their response? Most people are pretty nice. They are much happier to tell you, oh, that sounds cool. To tell you, I don't think I'd ever use that. Or, have you considered this? Because people it's not really, there's no benefit for them to ruin your day, right? They want to be polite. They don't know. And so most people will give you, or they are genuinely being like, yeah, that seems cool. I could see myself using that. And then you launch a thing and you say, hey, can I get your credit card to pay for this thing? And they go, oh no, I don't actually want
I'm not paying for it. It was good. It's a good idea, but I'm not going to.
So my big message to people is talk to people who are either buyers, they have bought from you, they've bought from a competitor, or people who put their hands up and say they're in the buying journey. And if you don't know how to find those people, there are services that exist to help you find them. So there's a great company called User Interviews that will find very specific people for you. Another one called Respondent.io. They'll find very specific people for you. So pay a little bit of money out of pocket and get them to source the right people, because a few interviews focus on the right questions with the right people is way, way more valuable than you reaching out to your personal network, who may or may not be your ideal customer, who's not in the buying journey, and just asking them, what do you think? Because you'll get lots of feedback. We all love to share our opinions. It won't be that helpful. It'll feel really helpful though. Let me tell you, 300 interviews in, I was like, I'm a fucking rock star. I did all this validation. My business is going to be a huge success. No, I was not doing it right.
Such great tips. Kevin asks, do you have any industry standard wisdom or insights to offer in regards to creating open dialogue and comfortably communicating with insulated decision makers? So how do you spark the conversation? Try to establish that comfort level so they're not just telling you the nice things.
Totally. So the way that I do it is first I start with, I ask them like what I call icebreaker questions. And the purpose of the icebreaker questions, remember that my focus on the interview is to understand a buyer's journey, whether they have recently bought something or whether they are currently in it. Again, I'm not talking to people who just are randos. They're people who are put their hand up and said, I'm looking to solve this problem, or people who bought a solution, whether it be mine or a competitor's. And again, it doesn't need to be a direct competitor. It can be another way they're solving the problem. And so my whole focus of the interview is on understanding that buyer's journey, but I'll start the interview with some icebreaker questions that are designed to be easy, to get them used to remembering things. I'll make it very conversational, make lots of small talk in the beginning. And I don't have a set list of questions I'm going through. It's not like these are the 10 questions I'm going to ask. I follow their journey. So there's a timeline in every buying journey, right? There's the trigger event, the moment that they realize I have a problem I need to solve. I might not actively be searching for a solution yet, but I know that this is a problem. And there's the end point. Well, it's not really the end point for them, but it's the end point in the interview, which is I bought a product. I'm using the product. I'm evaluating the product. I'm trying to decide if I'm happy with the product. And so between those places, there's all this cool stuff that's happening, right? They're evaluating different solutions. They're narrowing their options. They're making trade-offs. They're saying, I could take this, but if I do that, it's going to cost this much more. And all of that information is what I'm trying to pull out of them. So really what they're doing, the way that I'll describe it, and this is a tip that Bob Mesa talks about, I'll say, think about this as though we're creating a documentary of your buying journey. And I want to fill in all the details from the beginning to the end, right? And so they're not having to feed me their opinion. They're not trying to look smart necessarily. They're just sharing what happened. And what's fascinating about doing these interviews is that oftentimes you'll sit down on a call with somebody, and by the end of it, they go, oh my God, I had no idea that's why I did that. Because we're not at a conscious level being really thoughtful about most buying decisions, right? If it's something huge, like, something that's going to be a massive investment for our business, it's probably a very methodical decision. But if it's something not that big, like, a new piece of software we're going to try, that's not a huge cost, or it's like, a personal item, then we're not being that thoughtful. And so when you sit down with them and you start to help them to pull out that story, they start to connect the dots of all the different events that were happening, and they go, wow. I just did an interview. Sometimes I'll do mock interviews with a client of mine that runs a tech accelerator. And I did an interview with somebody who had recently bought a couple different sweaters. And you think a sweater, right? Like, what's the story behind a sweater? And there was this amazing story behind it, that this was his 5th business. And he was starting in this new vertical, a space that he wasn't that familiar in. And he had all of these other sweaters, but they were branded from previous things that he'd done, or they were bright, or they were like, because he's this flashy guy. And he was like, I wanted my clothing I wanted it to disappear. I wanted it not to be a topic of conversation. I didn't want them to think about what I was wearing, ask me questions about a logo. I really just wanted, and I didn't want to be too flashy, because I was talking to people who worked in the kind of like home services space, and I didn't want to show up in like a suit and like fancy shoes, because I knew that they wouldn't respect that. So there was all of this stuff behind this simple decision to buy a sweater. And when you start to realize stuff like that, it's like, wow, it dictates how you design products, but from a marketer's perspective, it's just a gold mine.
Amazing. So it's really the comfort level is almost making that conversation like a consultation, where you're helping them uncover what that journey is. And honestly, if somebody approached me with an interview that we're going to be uncovering all this stuff, I'll be like, sign me up. I want to be a part of that. So that's awesome. I have a question for you in relation to marketing, and it's probably relative to some other squads, but like, how do you know so how do you know you need to be interviewing customers more? Let's say that you already have a very well-established customer process. You interview them. You think that the questions are good, solid. You're updating your messaging ever so often. Even like on a sales perspective, you can update your sequences and your outreach sequences. But how do you know it's broken? How do you know it's time to speak to your customers again? Like how often should you be interviewing your customers?
Great question. So again, like I'd say that you want to tie it to strategic initiatives that are happening in the business. So maybe you're like, we want to redesign our pricing page, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this might be a good time to talk to customers because you want to understand what are the objections people have around your pricing. Like when they compare you to other things, are you actually doing a good job in comparing yourself? Because what you see on so many pricing pages is that, especially in the software world and the SaaS world, is you'll see that people are like, here's all our features and here's our competitor and all their features. But people aren't comparing you to their competitors. They're comparing you to hiring an intern, or they're comparing you to using a solution that isn't even comparable to you. So for instance, with the proposal software, they might be doing it still in like Word and it's ugly, but it's working.
It happens all the time. That's
Yeah, right.
big like proponent or percentage of our prospect base is they're still using Word for proposal.
Totally, totally. And so there you have to think about understanding what are the alternate solutions that they're using. How do you frame your offer to make it seem like the obvious choice, the best choice? As April Dunford says, like obviously awesome. And so I would say tie your when you're going to do kind of like a bigger research project. When I say bigger, I think this is where a lot of teams get hung up. Like a lot of teams will be like, we need to create personas. And so we're going to go out and we're going to talk to 30 customers, and we are going to then turn them into these, 3 or 4 personas, and then we're going to be good. And it's like, well, you'll probably hire some other marketers between now and when you did the persona work. And those marketers might be working on Google ads or Facebook ads, or maybe they're content marketers that are writing blog pieces, or maybe they're helping you to grow your audience through their own personal brand and they're posting on Facebook or LinkedIn rather. And like, so I say that like when you are feeling like you want more inspiration, one customer interview is like, it's like a whole boatload of inspiration. And when you have a specific problem that you want to solve, that's when you get surgical with it. And you're like, okay, we want to talk to these type of people and we want to understand this. And that's what we're going to focus on. But really focus it around the project. And some teams, they like one thing that drifted in the beginning, which I think they might still do. Drift, if people aren't familiar, it's a big competitor to Intercom, and they've got the little chat bubbles at the bottom of pages. Yeah. But I remember Dave Cancel saying back in the day, like he'd just get everybody to man the response to customer support. And that was a really good way to keep people close to the customer. So it doesn't, like the type of interviews I teach are very focused on marketing. But if you're using interviews and talking to customers for product, if you're using them for sales, you might find different approaches work for you. But I remember David Cancel talking about he would go through all of they had like an onboarding survey, a couple questions, and he'd sit down with a glass of wine and he would just spend a couple hours processing it. There's nothing more important for leaders and like people in the trenches than to consistently be interacting with the customer, because it's really easy to fall into this pattern where we know best and groupthink happens, and like we can dictate what we think people need without actually engaging with the people that you're making solutions for.
So a lot of your work is based on like buyer psychology. Talks a lot about your inspirations, people you've worked with, Bob Messa, et cetera. I'm just curious, like if you were to, like, I know there's a lot of buyer psychology. By the way, if you haven't checked Katelyn's newsletter, go sign up right now on customercamp.io. You will get all of these nuggets in her newsletters. It's one of the best newsletters out there. I think like 38,000 subscribers or something like that. It's fantastic. So there's a lot on your site about just buyer psychology. What are like the top 3 things you need to understand about buyer psychology to win?
Great question. So I'll share that the way that I came up with the topic for the newsletter of focusing on buyer psychology was based on jobs to be done. So I'm really nerdy about jobs to be done, but it was basically like, if you want to understand why people buy, jobs to be done in customer research and interviews and like review mining, all things that I teach inside of my business, really, really useful. But on the other side, I was like, if that's the stuff I sell, how do I create a really compelling, consistent piece of content in a newsletter that people are going to want? I'm like, well, the other way to understand why people buy is just at a broader level, buyer psychology. It's not your specific customers, but it's people as a broad level. So that was what inspired me to choose that topic. And the things that I would say are the most critical to understand, I would narrow them down to, you said 3, but I'm going to give you a bonus one.
Yes.
Trigger events. Trigger events are massive. So understanding what causes somebody to realize they might need a solution like yours. And you'll find that there are really kind of niche ones that are edge cases, but there's often themes. And when you figure out what those themes are, there are ways that you can covertly target those people at the right time, because context is everything in marketing. So trigger events, learn your customers' trigger events, because that's what moves them into, I need a solution. Next thing is, you guys are all familiar with this, social proof, right? Like, we don't necessarily trust companies. We trust people, and we particularly trust people who we already know, right? So when you see people talking about something being great, you see that 900 people have just signed up in the last hour. Any way that you can communicate when your content on your landing pages, inside of your products, you can show proof that other people are getting results, that the claims that you're making are validated through people who are not necessarily paid spokespeople of the company. That's a huge, huge one. So find ways to basically pepper social proof everywhere. And the other one is urgency, right? If we don't have a reason to act now, that's why trigger events are important, because trigger events create urgency oftentimes, at least they create awareness that a problem exists. But oftentimes, if there's no urgency, there's no reason to act today. And so particularly for marketers, find ways to create urgency without coming off as a scammy marketer, right? It's not like this deal goes away in 24 hours. And if you reload this page, it'll still be going away in 24 hours. Like, people are smart enough to know that that's bullshit. Right. But if you can find ways to authentically create urgency, it will move people who are fence sitters into decision makers. And that's what we need to do, because if you don't have a reason to do anything soon, you won't do it. And then the last one, which is my absolute favorite, because it's insanely powerful, but it's a lot of work, and so most people never do it, is the mere exposure effect. So the more that we're exposed to an idea or a brand, the more we come to like it, or a person. And so if you look at Coca-Cola, I just found this stat for a workshop I'm doing, but like, Coca-Cola spends 75% of their revenue back into advertising and sales. And if you think that that's mind-boggling, considering they're the most recognized brand on the planet, like, the word Coca-Cola is second only to the word okay for languages. Like, everyone knows what okay means, and everyone knows what Coca-Cola means second to that. So they have massive brand awareness. You'd think they could take their foot off the gas a little bit and stop investing so much in marketing and sales. But guess what? Coca-Cola understands the power of the mere exposure effect. People trust things more. They like them more the more they see them. If we're warm to an idea at first, we see it over and over and over, we come to like it and trust it. And so continuing to show up consistently is really, really important. And I find a lot of businesses won't put the effort into consistency. They think that branding is a mistake because it's like, it's not a direct response. You're not going to immediately get a conversion, but it takes time. It takes time to build that. And I think that a lot of people are sleeping on it. They just don't put the effort in, and therefore they never see that benefit. And if, the world's biggest brands still get it, then as a small brand, you need to do it.
Katelyn just dropping it hot, like very hot today with all the tips. This has been amazing. Time is up though. So thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you for all of the awesome questions. We couldn't get to all of them. I'm so sorry. There was a lot of them today. So Katelyn, just last question. Like, if somebody wants to learn more, or they want to get your call sheets, or they want to subscribe, like, how do they connect with you? How do they learn more?
Yeah, so they can visit my website, which is customercamp.co, not .com. And they can learn more about me there. But if you want to interact and hang out, I'm really active on Twitter. That's kind of my primary spot where I hang out. So let's connect there. I also hang out on LinkedIn, not as active over there, but I post a lot of my winners from Twitter on LinkedIn. I do some stuff over on LinkedIn too. So we can connect in either of those spots. But if you want to learn more with the cheat sheets and get access to both of those places and find me, then I would go to customercamp.co. And you can also sign up for my newsletter, which is, really fucking good. Like, we work really hard on it. I'm not alone. I don't do it by myself, but we really work hard on making it a great resource.
So good. And I did say customercamp.io, so I made a mistake. It's customercamp.co, so .co. So
no problem. Thank you, Liz Bond, for putting that in the comments.
There you have it. So thanks again so much. Next week, we're spreading all the love. Amelia Taylor's going to join us. She's feeling everything she's learned being a seller turned marketer. And I'm sharing everything I've learned marketing to sellers. So join us next week. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.